Hi everybody, JJ back again with another Asus PCDIY video, and in this one we're going to be talking about the latest generation of Asus B850 motherboards, specifically the ROG STRIX series of motherboards. So in this overview video we're going to be talking about actually 4 different models. 3 of those you actually see here in front of me with the Mini ITX, the Dash I, the A, which is the ever so popular white themed base series of motherboards, and the entry point for ROG Strix series, the Dash F, as well as actually our flagship Dash E, which really offers an amazing set of features, functions, and specifications, especially for those of you that don't want to go on jump all the way into x870 while offering some very compelling features and functions normally only found on x870 class based motherboards. So in this overview, we're going to talk about all the function, feature, spec, give you an overview to help you understand the differences between the boards, as well as also what are you going to be getting if you decide to consider an ROG Strix motherboard as opposed to a tough gaming series based motherboard. All 4 of these motherboards are going to be a great foundation for those who are going to be upgrading maybe from a prior generation based system or maybe building a system for the first time, and definitely for those of you that are probably going to be a little bit more focused on specialized features, functions, as well as premium aesthetics. So we're excited to be able to talk about these latest generation of Asus ROG Strix B850 based motherboards. So let's get ready and go ahead and jump into it. So now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what differentiates B850 from the prior generation and how it actually compares to the rest of the 800 series based of chipsets. So for those of you that are right now looking at for the first time, essentially this new AM5 platform, 800 series is the most recent chipset range from AMD. Let's go ahead and quickly take a look at the actual chipset lineup as it sits from AMD. You're going to currently have on the highest end side the recently launched 800 series. So this is going to be for x870E and x870. We have full overview videos and guides to be able to give you more information if you're interested in those range of motherboards. Here within the kind of the mid-range and the enthusiast sweet spot segmentation of the market, we have B850, which is of course a follow-up from the prior generation B650. And then on the most entry side, we have the B840 based chipset. But in this video, we're going to be focusing only on B850 based motherboards. Now, if we go ahead and take a look at what you're going to be getting and what you won't be getting from a chipset perspective when it comes to B850, it's actually pretty close to what you're going to be getting on x870. The main differential is going to be some of the mandatory I/O specification, as well as some of the PCI lane configuration options. So we can see right here that for B850, the default minimum specification is going to be for a by 16 or 2 by 8 PCI Express Gen 4. Technically, this is an option. You'll actually find on all of our ROG Strix models, they are all going to be offering PCI Express Gen 5 for that by 16 graphics slot. So in that regard, it's actually very close to essentially an x870 based motherboard. All of the motherboards will have, of course, a PCI Express Gen 5, PCIe NVMe M.2 SSD slot. You can see essentially the PCI lanes that are going to be supported is going to be the same. They all support overclocking for the CPU in a number of different configurations. They also support DRAM overclocking, so if you're going to be running Expo kits or XMP kits such as the kind of the popular but overclocked profile, such as 6000, 62, 6400, or even higher speeds, these are all supported on these motherboards. The other kind of, I'd say, key differential you'll note is going to be the USB specification support on x870. You saw the introduction of 40 gigabits as being the mandatory spec, and on the B850 base side of the fence, you're not going to see that. Generally, pretty much the maximum you're going to have is going to be 20 gigabits, although all of our motherboards are going to be supporting, with the exception of the Mini ITX because of its form factor, a USB 4 add-in card. That means that you do have the ability to step up from even, let's say, the very performant and high-speed 20 gigabits that these motherboards are going to offer you. If you want to go up to 40 gigabits, you will have that as an option. So next up, now I want to go ahead and talk a little bit more about what are going to be the base minimum set of features, functions, specifications. So we actually outlined this previously in our Tough Gaming series of motherboards overviews for those B850 base boards, but we're going to quickly touch on this. Now keep in mind that this baseline is going to be first set up actually from the Tough Gaming model, so all of these are actually going to have a step up from that, but we will offer kind of a clarity between essentially what you're going to be getting from the Tough Gaming series to the ROG Strix series. So if you again are comparing maybe the Tough Gaming B850 Plus, maybe you're comparing it to the Dash A or the Dash F, what are you going to be getting? You can easily check some of the key specification differences on product pages, but we're going to give you hopefully a little bit more insight to understand where you're going to be seeing differences. So let's first look at the base minimum set of specifications, features, functions you're going to be getting. Okay, so now let's go ahead and talk about what you're going to get from a minimum perspective in terms of the features, functions, and specs on these boards. Again, this is going to be applicable to the ATX-based motherboards, and what you're seeing on screen is actually applicable to even our Tough Gaming models, and then we're going to note actually where the differentials come into play from tough gaming to ROG Strix. Okay, so first and foremost, you're going to have PCI Express Gen 5, so that primary graphics card slot. That means it supports PCI Express Gen 5. Fastest graphics card as of right now, the 4090, does actually not support this. And actually, for many of you that tend to kind of worry too much about the interconnect speed, it's not an issue. Even if this was running at PCI Express Gen 4x8, it wouldn't restrict the performance of a 4090 class graphics card. So it's not really something to be concerned with, but you are going to be getting that latest generation spec there. Next one is going to be, of course, for that primary M.2 SSD graphics, for that M.2 SSD slot, you are going to have support for PCI Express Gen 5. So there's going to be at least one PCI Express Gen 5 M.2 SSD slot on the motherboard, and we'll also have our easy Q-latch design, and it's actually been further upgraded on ROG Strix, and we'll show a little bit later the difference between the ROG Strix and the tough gaming model. You're going to get at least 3, and technically actually on ROG Strix it's not 3, it's actually 4 PCI Express NVMe M.2 SSD slots on the motherboard. You're going to at least get 10 rear ports. So when we talk about actually the I/O connectivity, really nice I/O connectivity for many of you that are going to be coming from an older generational motherboard that might only have maybe 5, 6, 7 ports. This is a nice upgrade. In addition, you're going to get significantly faster speeds than you probably have on that motherboard. You're also going to have at least one 20 gigabits USB-C port along with an internal USB-C port. So that is going to be a nice upgrade. And in fact, on ROG Strix, again, this is actually going to be offering an upgrade from Tough Gaming where you're going to have at least 2 USB-C headers on the motherboard on the rear, which is pretty cool. You have USB 4 add-in card support, so that's going to be a nice upgrade, although keep in mind that the Dash E does offer 40 gigabits USB-C natively. All the boards will feature Wi-Fi 7 along with our Q antenna design, which is an easier, faster, simpler way to be able to go ahead and connect the antenna, and we'll demonstrate that a little bit later. You're going to get Bluetooth 5.4. All the boards are going to have at least 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. The actual Dash E model will actually even have higher grade Ethernet. It'll have 5 gigabit space Ethernet, and they'll all feature LandGuard, which LandGuard is a specialized design which helps to protect it from surges, spikes, sags, things along those lines. You'll at least get at least 6 chassis fan headers, and actually on some of the higher end models, you'll even get more fan headers and one dedicated AIO pump header. They'll all feature our new 8-point fan control, which will be accessible in the UEFI BIOS, as well as also within the operating system for just more advanced granularity and control when it comes to your fan controls. They'll all be featuring an 8-layer PCB. This helps to actually improve DRAM scaling performance. If you're interested in overclocking, it can also actually help to, alongside the copper content of the motherboard, to reduce actually board temperatures. Pro-Cool power connectors, which are going to be thicker pins. These thicker pins help to actually improve the current handling performance as well as reduce resistance. The QLED technology is a 4-segment LED that's going to be on the motherboard for the CPU, the graphics, the DRAM, and for the boot device. But for actually this generation, we also have what we call dim detect, which means that when the power supply is connected, before you actually post or power on the system, the LED will light if you don't actually have the dim fully seated. So this helps to actually guide you and make sure that you're going through the build process correctly. So that's a nice update. Full HD UEFI BIOS, it's just sharper and clearer and easier to be able to go ahead and use. Plus, we can fit more information on screen. Complementing that, we have our brand new Q dashboard utility, which we'll actually show a little bit later on when we talk about UEFI features and functions. This is a brand new visual utility, which will show you a map of all the ports and slots on the motherboard. It's very cool. Asus AI Advisor, it's going to be an advanced web-based, essentially ChatGPT-like system that uses an LLM that you can actually ask questions about, not only specific to Asus hardware, but even features and functions. The really cool part is it can actually even hook in on a low level to the motherboard to be able to provide prompts that can physically be engaged from the actual utility. An example is that you could ask the system, how do I make my system quieter? And when you do that, it can actually prompt you with fan controls so that you can immediately go ahead and quiet your system down. Pretty cool. And then, of course, all of these boards will support Asus Aura Sync, means that they can synchronize lighting like you see here with my demo system next to me. And that, of course, is executed through our Armoury Crate software suite, which allows for system monitoring, RGB management, and profiling, and a lot more. And also from this generation, we've gone ahead and implemented what we call Driver Hub. We introduced this with our X870 series of motherboards, which is an ultra lightweight utility that's web-based that scans your system for your drivers after installing your Ethernet driver for you, and also gives you quick access to utilities, and it can offer you real-time updates as new drivers and utilities become available. So that is going to wrap out the kind of the base expectation in terms of what you're going to get on these motherboards. But now let's go ahead and talk a bit more about how the ROG Strix series models will set essentially an upgrade guarantee from the Tough Gaming series of motherboards. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about now what are you going to see when you upgrade from, let's say, the Tough Gaming motherboards to the ROG Strix motherboards. Now, we went ahead and replaced the motherboard we previously had there from the Dash A to the Dash F, but this won't matter. Essentially, if you are going to be upgrading from the Tough Gaming, which right now we only have one ATX-based Tough Gaming B850 model, to any one of the ROG 6 models, all of these areas that we're going to talk about are going to be upgraded. So let's go ahead and take a look at these areas of difference. First and foremost, we're going to see in our little list right here that we've got the RGB lighting on the I/O shroud. So this you're going to, of course, have where the Tough Gaming doesn't have that. The Tough Gaming actually has only one very small RGB lighting zone. It's all the way down here. You might not even notice it. But here, this is going to be a little bit more apparent. Looks great in the whiteboard. Looks great on the Dash F. Looks great on the Dash E. The VRM assembly, so the overall power delivery, when you talk about the power components, they are going to be higher grade power components. So that's going to be the actual things like the inductors, the chokes. They're going to be higher performing. Those power stages are going to be higher performing. The number. Overall, the power delivery is going to be very solid and reliable and performant on the Tough Gaming model. Again, you don't have to worry about, regardless of whether you're talking about a 7800X3D, a 9000X3D, a 9950X, they'll all run on this motherboard. No issues in terms of performance, stability, or reduced performance, but you are going to get a higher grade of power delivery on the ROG Strix models. The Q release design, you'll notice actually on the Tough Gaming model, this actually has a little bit of an ejection mechanism that's built in, and we'll demo this a little bit later, but the Q release is actually natively integrated into the actual slot on the ROG Strix motherboard. So it doesn't actually require anything. It's a little bit simpler, even easier to use. Very, very cool. You're going to get 4 PCI Express NVMe M.2 SSD slots on the ROG Strix, so that's going to be 4 versus 3 on the Tough Gaming, and actually will go up on the higher end models. So like take for instance like on the Dash E, you're going to have 5 slots. One of the M.2 slots is also going to feature a dual contact design. So actually on this Strix model, one of the cool things that you'll notice here is that this design is actually going to be upgraded on all of the models for the M.2. They have a quick release design. So there's actually just a little latch mechanism. I just lift that and I can angle out the M.2 heatsink. So that makes for even a simpler, easier installation experience. Now, all the motherboards, including the Tough Gaming, have our quick Q-latch design, which means you just pretty much angle in the drive, click it into place, and you're good to go. So they all benefit from that, but the ROG Strix models have this easier Q-latch design for the actual primary M.2 SSD heatsink, and they also all feature at least one heatsink that is going to be dual contact. We'll show a little bit more about this closer up when we take a physical close look up at the boards. So that is going to be another difference. Moving over to the next item is going to be the audio design. So the audio design, both of these feature an isolated audio design, but on the ROG Strix model, you actually are going to have a higher grade audio design. So that's going to be this section down here. If you're going to be utilizing an analog set of headphones, so that means 3.5 millimeter, you're going to be plugging that into the rear of the motherboard, or you're going to be plugging it into the front audio connection on your chassis. This ROG Strix boards will feature a higher end audio codec. It's going to be the higher end version of the codec with a discrete Savitech audio amp, and it also has a different audio suite package. It uses the Dolby integrated sound package versus the DTS audio package, which doesn't have as many options. Both of them are nice, solid options, and actually many competitors don't even offer an audio suite on their more entry offering like we're going to do on the Tough Gaming model. Both offer a great foundation, but if you're going to be using a little bit higher end headphones, again, that are analog driven and you don't have an external DAC or amp, then you're going to get a better audio design on the ROG Strix models. You're also going to have integrated power and clear CMOS. So actually, for the power button, it will be physically on the motherboard. So you'll actually have a button like right here. This is a power button. So if you're going to use it more in a kind of like benchtop kind of setup, you might appreciate that for when you're first kind of working with the system. And then on the actual rear, you will have a clear CMOS button, which can be very useful if you're going to be doing things like overclocking, and you potentially maybe need to reset the board back to factory defaults, things along those lines, potential debugging scenarios. So again, the Dash A, the Dash the Dash A, the Dash F, the Dash E, all have clear CMOS, and actually even the Mini ITX board also even has clear CMOS on the rear. So very cool in terms of that regard. They're all going to feature an OPT temp sensor. We'll take a closer look when we physically put the board under our secondary cameras as we go in on the boards. That is going to be great for those that might be maybe looking for supplemental water cooling, or maybe they just want additional flexibility for what's called temperature mapping. So you can go into our fan controls in the UEFI BIOS or in the operating system, and you can pick that temperature point to actually have your fans respond to. So you could actually have it maybe be an ambient portion in the chassis, or maybe physically connected to something else, and you can have it respond to that. There's also going to be more flexibility flexibility in terms of our AI overclocking centric controls, which are going to be available. And you also, of course, have a white model that we talked about with the Dash A, and you also have a Mini ITX model, which aren't available to you under the Tough Gaming series of motherboards. So those are going to be your upgrades if you decide to go from Tough Gaming to ROG Strix. Okay, so now that we've gone ahead and covered the differences between the ROG Strix and the Tough Gaming series of motherboards, let's actually go ahead and take a closer look at the motherboards. And we're going to go ahead and start off again with our entry to the ROG Strix series of B850 based motherboards with the Dash A, which also happens to be very popular because it's also our white themed board. So the Dash A is going to be, again, a great option for those that will be looking to build a bold and bright white themed base system. Really complements chassis like our GT302. Also going to be complementing our new A31 chassis, which you can get in white, and we have a great lineup of supporting white accessories and products, from fans to graphics cards to power supplies with white cables, coolers, and many other products that could complement a white theme based build. So let's get ready to go ahead and take a closer look at the ROG Strix B850-A gaming Wi-Fi. Okay, so we've got our ROG Strix B850-A gaming Wi-Fi board. So let's go ahead and take a closer look. You can first and foremost see that nice RGB on the I/O shroud right there, that very large silver heatsink assembly, which makes full contact not only with the power stages, but the inductors, the chokes right there. You got a higher grade power delivery than you do on the Tough Gaming models, but again, very stable, reliable, performant-based power delivery solution. Doesn't matter whether you're running a 7000 series, 9000 series, 9800X3D, 9950X, they're all going to run fantastic, no issues in this respect. Again, that large extended heatsink, it actually goes here for making contact directly with the power stages and extends all over here into the I/O shroud. You're going to then have two EPS 8-pin power connectors with our ProCool power design, which means thicker pins on the inside of the socket to be able to improve current handling and reduce resistance. You can also actually see we have an LED there to let you know that you actually don't have those connectors actually plugged in, which helps you just improve the PCDIY experience. As we move over right here, you're going to see that you have your fan headers, but you might have noticed that we actually have little protectors on those pins so that they can actually reduce the likelihood of them getting bent or damaged. So that is going to be like a subtle, this nice little upgrade that you get on the ROG Strix model. So you're going to have one for the AIO header, and then you're going to have two for your CPU. So one CPU and CPU OPT, so you can run 240mm AIO or a tower heatsink with a push and pull fan configuration. You can multiplex these headers though, so it's very easy to be able to run, let's say, 3 fans from one single header if needed. When we go ahead and move over here, you're going to see that you've got one 3-pin ARGB header that's going to be there. You can again also multiplex those in the event that you do need more ARGB devices connected than just the 3 headers that the motherboard has. You then have a power button right there, which allows you to kind of do a little bit of quick benchtop testings or setup. Of course, 4 DDR5 slots that are going to be on this motherboard. Then your 24-pin power connector. I'm going to go ahead and remove this because I don't need to show you guys that anymore, but you have your 24-pin motherboard power connector. You then have your internal USB-C, and then your legacy USB 3 that you're going to have there as well. So that rounds out those primary connections. Now, as we move back over here to the primary M.2 SSD slot, this is going to be one of the areas that you're actually going to have an upgrade compared to, let's say, the Tough Gaming model. So the really cool way that this has actually been designed is that it's a quick, easy latching mechanism. So I pretty much just lift it. Once I lift it, I can lift out the actual M.2 SSD heatsink, and I'm good to go. And if I were to take my M.2 SSD, I can take it in right there. I'm just going to angle it in and put it down. It locks into place. I would, of course, remove the thermal film, drop that down and lock it in, and I'm done. So super easy M.2 SSD installation. Okay, and if I need to pop it back out, there's a little depression mechanism right there. Just push it down and it removes it. So if I compare this to the Tough Gaming model, I'm going to go ahead and quickly grab the Tough Gaming model. And we go ahead and layer this over. Tough Gaming model actually uses screws, so you would actually have to unscrew this heatsink, as opposed to on this design, you're going to see right here that it's just that easy latch design. Okay, the other difference is that you notice actually when you lift this up, you will notice here that you actually have a heatsink underneath with another thermal pad. So technically, actually, there's a dual contact heatsink design, which for certain M.2 SSDs can be beneficial in terms of lowering their temperatures, especially for larger or more dense PCI NVMe M.2 SSDs, especially those highest performing PCI Express Gen 4 and then PCI Express Gen 5, especially when you start going into larger capacity M.2 based SSDs. Now, when we look below this, we have our by 16 slot, which is going to be, of course, PCI Express Gen 5, It's also going to be where we're installing our graphics card. But you'll notice that there's no lever. If again we go back to the Tough Gaming motherboard, you'll see that there's an actual lever. So once I depress that lever, that will allow me to easily eject the graphics card. Now, Asus patented this prior generation design, and it's been something that a lot of users really like, but we went ahead and made it better. So how did we make it better? Well, we fully integrated it into the slot. So now let's say if I were to take my graphics card, I'm going to go ahead and install this. It's locked in place, and so if I attempt to go ahead and lift it out from the back, it won't come out. So I'm holding down the motherboard, it doesn't come out. But if I just lift it a bit up here from the front, so from the front of the graphics card, generally about this area, and I lift at about a 2 to 3 degree angle, optimally about a 3 degree angle, the actual card will essentially remove. So you can see I can pull it out. So that is our Q release slim design. So let me go ahead and just do that again for you guys. You can see I'm going to go ahead and hold it and then pull out. So that's our Q release slim design. So you're going to get that on the ROG Strix, and that is again different from the Tough Gaming base models. Now, as we go down a little bit more, you're going to see you got, of course, a large heatsink right there. And if you were to remove this heatsink, you're going to then have access to essentially 3 more M.2 SSD slots. So you have one M.2 SSD slot right there, another M.2 SSD, and another M.2 SSD. So that's going to be a total of 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 on total on this motherboard. Okay. As we continue to go ahead and go down on the board, let's move that down a little bit. There we go. We're going to see we have one chassis fan header. We have a USB 2 header. USB 2 header, those are going to be good for like RGB controllers or things like AIO coolers, such as like our Strix LC series or our Ryu or Ryujin series, which are also available in white. You then have another chassis fan header. You have that USB 4 header right here. 2 more 3-pin ARGB headers, so that's a total of 3, and then 2 more chassis fan headers. So quite a bit of fan headers that are going to be on this model. You're going to have again 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 and 6, and then plus your AIO header at the top. So quite a bit there. And again, you can multiplex out. It's very easy to run a PWM fan splitter to one of these headers and be able to run 3 or 4 fans. And then here you have your isolated audio design along with that Supreme Effects audio codec, audio grid capacitors, and that Savitech audio amp. So that is going to round out everything from a physical layout side on this motherboard. So lastly, let's go ahead and just quickly take a look at the rear IO. So we're going to go ahead and flip this board over here, take a look at the rear IO, and you're going to see that the rear IO is quite nice. So we've got an HDMI and a DP. We then, right at the top, we're going to have 4 Type A ports. Those are all high-speed 5 gigabit ports. Below that, we're going to have a Type C port. That's going to be 10 gigabits. And then we're also going to have another Type A port, which is also going to be 10 gigabits. Recently, we started implementing a feature that I absolutely love here, which is going to be that we also now have clear CMOS. It used to be really only offered on our high-end Dash E models, but now the Dash F and the Dash A all have clear CMOS. You can then see right next to that, you're going to have 2 Type A USB 2 ports, and one is going to be USB BIOS flashback, which works with this USB BIOS flashback port. So that means that you can go ahead and connect a flash drive, connect it to that port, plus this button, and even if you don't have the CPU, the graphics card, or the memory installed, you just connect the power supply, you can low-level update or recover the UEFI BIOS. As we move down in terms of the remaining ports, you're going to have another USB-C port. So again, that's going to be 2 rear USB-C ports, one 10 gig and one 20 gig, and then another 10 gigabit Type A port, and then a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port, which is also going to feature a LAN guard design to be able to protect it from surges, spikes, and sags. You're then going to have Wi-Fi 7 with Bluetooth 5.4. I will also note that the antenna that actually comes included is a matching white antenna, which is quite nice even with a white cable. And this uses our new Q antenna design, which, to demonstrate it for you, it's a push fit design, really simple to be able to go ahead and connect. It actually is faster, simpler, easier. You don't have to worry about kind of twisting the cable, and you actually also get better signal attenuation performance as well. So it's pretty much a win across the board. Another upgrade as well is that for the audio design on ROG Strix models, you're going to get an actual optical output where you don't get optical on the Tough Gaming. So to recap again, you're going to have 4 ports there, 2 points there, so that's going to be 6. Then that's going to be 8, and that's going to be 10. So a total of 10 rear ports and a lot of high-speed ports, including those 2 USB Type-C. And if you add in this Type-C, and then we go back into the internal headers on the motherboard, which you're going to have that other Type-C, it's going to be a total of 3 internal Type-C connectors. So now let's go ahead and quickly just take a look at the difference between the Dash F and the Dash A. And it's really going to differ in a couple of different ways. One is going to be the power delivery, which you can see right here. This is going to be moving over to a 16 V-core based power delivery design. So this is just going to be a little bit even higher end in terms of that respect. Again, all of the boards that we've talked about, including the Tough Gaming series, are going to offer a stable, reliable, and performant-based power delivery design, regardless of the CPU 7000 series, 9000 series. The biggest differential I would say is going to actually be in terms of the rear I/O, where you're going to get a total increase in terms of 12 ports versus 10. And you're also going to get an increase in terms of actually the PCI Express Gen 5 PCI NVMe M.2 SSD support, where you're going to go from 1 to 2. So those are going to be some of the key differences that you're going to have, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at the motherboard, and we'll go ahead and dive into it. Okay, so here we've got the ROG STRIX B850-F gaming Wi-Fi. So let's go ahead and take a closer look. Again, we've got that large VRM assembly that we have on here. Great, stable, reliable power delivery. Also, just like the Dash A, has that extended VRM heatsink design to be able to ensure really great thermal performance for the VRM under load. Then right here at the top, you're going to have your dual 8-pin EPS power connectors for your CPU, all of course with the thicker pins, so the Pro-Cool power connectors, same as the Dash A. You're going to have those little protectors that we also talked about before, of course, CPU and CPU OPT, and then your AIO header, so that's going to be present. Your 4-segment QLED diagnostic, just like the Dash A, also with the dim detect design. Again, that means that if I have, take for instance, let's say this dim is lifted and it's not fully seated in place, until actually I physically depress it, the actual LED will be active, and this is actually before you even post the system. So it's a cool feature. So technically we have kind of like a 5 LED design. So you have for the CPU, for the DRAM, for the graphics card, and for the boot device. Okay. We then have our first ARGB header that's on there. Of course, those can be multiplex, just like your CPU fan headers. They can be multiplex if you want to add more than one device. So you can generally add 2, 3, 4, sometimes even 5 LED devices to one single header. Just depends on their power requirements. Same thing generally with fans. It depends on their power requirements, but you generally can comfortably run 3 fans, generally, if not actually 4 fans from one single chassis fan header. They default to 1 amp in terms of their actual power output. You've got a power button right there, your 24-pin power connector. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove that right there so that we can continue to take a closer look at all of our corresponding headers. So as we move down here, we can see we've got an internal USB-C. This is going to be 10 gigabits. Then we have our legacy USB 3 that's going to be right there, our 4 DIMM slots that we have, then of course our primary PCI Express Gen 5 M.2 SSD slot that we've got on this board. Now keep in mind that the Dash F, compared to the Tough Gaming as well as also the ROG Strix Dash A, gets an upgrade to having actually 2 of the slots be PCI Express Gen 5. Like all ROG Strix B850 boards, you also get this nice Q release design. So again, it's just this nice little lever. You remove that and you're good to go. So a toolless design, and then from there I can take my corresponding M.2 SSD and lock it into place there. So I'm good to go, and pretty much put in my drive and my heatsink, and I'm locked in. So really simple and easy process. And also this is going to be a dual contact design, which is not present on the Tough Gaming models. This is also on the Dash A, where you have the secondary heatsink with the thermal pad. So essentially you have a dual contact design for the top and bottom. So that is also going to be present on this board. You then have, of course, your primary PCI Express Gen 5 slot for your graphics card. You'll see no actually depression lever, because this is just like the Dash A, where it has the Q release slim design. So that means you can easily remove the graphics card. So of course, if I show you again, I install the graphics card. If I pull it here from the back, you're not going to see that it doesn't come out because it's locked into place, but we have a specialized design where right up here at the front, if you access the card and lift it at about a 3-degree angle, it will actually pull the card out. So you can see right there, it's a really nice simplified design. So that's going to be Q release slim. That is actually on all of the ROG Strix B850 boards. So the Dash A, the Dash F, the Dash E, and even actually the Mini ITX based motherboard. Very, very cool to actually have that on Mini ITX. From there, of course, you're going to have an M.2 SSD here, another M.2 SSD here, and another M.2 SSD. Those other ones are not dual contact design, so do keep that in mind. But you are going to have dual Gen 5 support, and then 2 that are going to be PCI Express Gen 4. So as we move all the way down here towards the bottom, we're going to have another fan header. We're then going to have a USB 2 header, a USB 2 header. You're then going to have another chassis fan header, USB 4 header right there, and then an ARGB and ARGB, so a total of 3 ARGB headers, another chassis fan header, and another chassis fan header. So if you actually count the chassis fan headers, so you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, right, 5, 6, and then 7, including your actually AIO pump header, so quite a bit in terms of that. And then of course your isolated audio design with your Supreme FX audio grade capacitors, and the Savitech audio amp that is also built on board. So that is going to round out everything that we're going to have from the physical board overview. And also just take a look at this section right over here. If I actually pull off this little film for you, you'll actually see this kind of reflective property it's talking about. So if I tilt the board a little bit, maybe you'll kind of see a little bit of that color play. It's a really cool kind of design that it has right there that gives it a really nice kind of cool look. So pretty nice, interesting design aesthetic that we have there. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn this board to its side and take a look at the actual I/O. So when we take a look at the I/O, this is going to be upgraded compared to the Dash A. You've got HDMI and DP, of course, which you can utilize with the integrated Radeon graphics core, which is on 7000 series and 9000 series. You then have 4 Type A ports that are all 5 gigabits. You then have a 10 gigabit USB-C, another 10 gigabit Type A, and then 2 Type A ports, which are going to be USB 2. Those, of course, also are going to be directly below. You're going to have another 2 Type A ports with USB 2, with one of those actually also working for the USB BIOS flashback. So that means, again, you can update the UEFI BIOS, no CPU, no DRAM, no graphics card, just connect the power supply. I love also, again, you've got your clear CMOS button right there to be able to factory low-level reset the board back to defaults. You're going to have your other 20 gigabits USB-C port, so you get dual USB-C ports, an upgrade compared to Tough Gaming, which only has one rear USB-C port, another Type A 10 gig port, and then 2.5 gigabit Ethernet with our land guard design, our Q antenna design, which of course the Q antenna is just like the Dash A and just like all the other models. You're going to get Wi-Fi 7, and you're also going to get of course that easy push fit design, right? It's a lovely base design implementation, and then your optical audio, and of course your line level audio outputs. So again, 12 ports on the rear, quite nice, and on those nice upgrades that we also have in terms of the storage. So that is going to round out the ROG Strix F gaming Wi-Fi. All right, so now that we've gone ahead and taken a closer look at the Dash F, let's go ahead and take a look at the last on the ATX side, which is going to be the Dash E. This is going to be our flagship board. Now, definitely this is going to get a little bit more expensive than, of course, the $300 price point that we had for the Dash F. And for some of you might be wondering, well, why would I want to go up to this board and why not just get an X870 base motherboard? And really the key value proposition is going to be that the spec is really impressive in terms of the totality of what you're going to be getting, actually offering generally a higher class of spec and features and functions than you would generally find on entry X870 base motherboards. It is a fantastic option if you're really looking for kind of a lot of those higher end, more premium I/O based specifications, the number of ports and the slots and things along those lines, along with premium additions that you're going to get within the board, and we're going to touch on that. So again, from a high level, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the key things you're going to see within the Dash E. So when we take a look here at the Dash E model, some of the immediate items, of course, can be even a higher grade power delivery design with even more performant power stages that we're going to have on this model. You're going to see that we move up to actually 5 M.2 SSD slots on this motherboard compared to the Dash A and to the Dash F, which had 4. So again, we move up to 5 versus 4. This motherboard is also going to be going over to 5 gigabit LAN versus 2.5 gigabit LAN. You're also going to see the introduction of 40 gigabits USB 4 support, which again wasn't a standard requirement on B850, where all of the other motherboards had the option to be able to add in 40 gigabits via an add-in card. This one actually natively has 40 gigabits on the rear, but it also has 20 gigabits. So it has awesome USB-C connectivity natively built on board. And this is also going to be our most enthusiast-centric board, which features AIOC technology on this motherboard, along with things like dynamic OC switcher, which will allow you to run actually PBO-based overclocking, alongside actually a manually defined multiplier-based overclock, and it actually will automatically switch on a hardware level based on actually the load that's being placed. So generally lightly threaded applications, take for instance like games, and generally many type of 2D applications will be more kind of lightly threaded, benefiting from PBO, but maybe a more let's say a multi-threaded application like rendering would take advantage actually of an all-core OC. And so you can actually run both of those dynamically as opposed to having to pick going towards one route versus the other. So a lot of really cool features and functions, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at this motherboard and see what it brings to the table. Now, before we put it under the secondary camera, I want to show you actually a close-up shot of actually the heatsink design so that you can actually see one of those differences when we talk about the 3 PCI Express Gen 5 slots that are on this motherboard. In total, there's actually 5, but 2 of them are actually going to be featured that dual contact design versus on the other motherboards when I've shown this to you, only that primary slot right here has actually had that dual contact design. So here we're taking a closer look at that dash E, and we can see right from the front facade all the heat sinks are on there. But if we go ahead and remove those heat sinks, this is what the actual board's going to look like underneath. You can see it's really packed to the gills in terms of that super high performance VRM assembly. But actually what we're more interested is actually going to be the M.2 slot design. So we can see here we've got one PCI Express Gen 5 slot, and as I noted on this board, you actually have three PCI Express Gen 5 slots that are going to be on here. In total, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's a total of 5 M.2 slots on here, and you're going to see 2 of these are actually a dual contact design, and actually also one of them is going to support what's called our new Q slide design. This actually allows you to use even more smaller, more compact M.2 SSDs, and quickly, instead of having to make like an adjustment via like standoffs, which you had to do in the past, you can pretty much just slide this actually mechanism, have it to align with the corresponding length, and you're good to go. So this is just something I wanted to quickly highlight and show you that there is also a difference not only in the total number of slots, but also that at least 2 of these slots are going to be a dual contact based design. Okay, so here we've got our ROG STRIX B850-E gaming Wi-Fi on our secondary camera, so let's go ahead and take again that closer look on the board. So like we've done with all the motherboards, you can first and foremost see that really nice RGB on the I/O shroud, that really large VRM heatsink assembly, which is super dense. It's even actually larger than it is on the Dash F. And of course, you also have that increased power delivery design on the Dash E compared to the Dash F. And again, this is an extended heatsink design, so it actually doesn't just end with contact here on the primary power stages, but the inductors, but actually also extends over here into the I/O shroud as well. You've got your dual 8-pin CPU power connectors on here with the thicker pins, the ProCool power design on this model. As we move over right here in terms of the actual fan connectors, these are going to have the same little protective covers that we have on the other models like the Dash F and the Dash A. You've got your CPU OPT, and then you have your AIO header that's also going to be on this model. So you're good to go. And again, these can all be multiplexed. You've got your first ARGB header, which is going to be on this board. So you can see right there. Again, you can multiplex that out if needed. Continuing on right there in terms of the actual layout is going to be the 4-segment LED. So that's going to be the QLED. So you're going to have one for the CPU, one for the graphics, one for the DRAM, one for the boot device. This will also have the DRAM detect, which again means that if you have the DRAM not fully installed, then you're going to have that LED light up until you actually have the memory module fully seated. From there, you're actually going to also have your 4-segment debug LED display, which some people really like that. In addition to that, you're also going to have your power button, which is going to be right here. I'm going to go ahead and now remove the power that we have there to light up that display. And as we continue down, we're going to have that 10 gigabits internal USB-C. We're then also going to have that legacy USB 3 header right there. You're going to have one chassis fan header. So it's important to note this actually chassis fan header, because in total this actually board is going to have more chassis fan headers than any of our other motherboards in this ATX-based lineup. So you've got a chassis fan header there. You've got your 4 SATA ports that are going to be right here. As we move to the center of the motherboard, we're going to have, of course, our PCI Express Gen 5 M.2 SSD slot, but keep in mind on the Dash E, this board supports actually 5 M.2 SSDs, and actually 3 of them are going to support Gen 5, and one of them is going to have this really nice quick release. So under the quick release, you can see right there, you can go ahead and pop this one out, and you're quick access and good to go. So of course you just remove the thermal pad, pop your M.2 SSD in there, so like so, just like we've showed on the other motherboards, and it locks it in place. And then of course if you want to depress the M.2 SSD, you can go ahead and remove it, and you're good to go. And that is of course going to be a dual contact design, so very simple. You're going to get the Q release slim design, which allows you to easily remove your graphics card from the motherboard, a really appreciated feature, which I will show for one last time for you guys on the ATX based models. So again, just locks into place. If I pull it from the back, it's actually locked, it's not going to come out. And then if I lift right here at about a 3-degree angle from the front, it will pull out the graphics card. So that is going to be the Q release sim. No button or nothing that you have to worry about in terms of getting kind of blocked. Then you have this large heatsink assembly that's here, that's actually going to be protecting, offering thermal dissipation for the M.2 SSDs. And you have also one secondary dual contact M.2 SSD here. So there's going to be essentially 2 here and then 2 here. So you're going to have a total of 5 M.2 SSD slots on this board. As we continue down here at the bottom, fan header and fan header. You're then going to have that OPT temp sensor, which of course the other ROG Strix boards have, is that OPT temp sensor, USB 2 port, USB 2 port. That's going to be great, of course, for things like your AIO coolers, like our ROG Ryu, our ROG Strix LC series, our Prime series. Any one of our AIO coolers would of course be utilizing that, and of course ARGB controllers, other devices, ARGB header, so there's a total of 3 ARGB headers on this board, another chassis fan header and another chassis fan header. And then from there, you're going to have, of course, your audio for your Supreme Effects audio design, audio grade capacitors, and of course that Supreme Effects audio design implementation with the Savitech audio amp. So that is going to round out the hardware-based design, but let's go ahead and now look at the rear I/O. We can see right here we've got an HDMI, we have a DP, got clear CMOS, and then we're also going to have right here a USB BIOS flashback. We're going to have 2 Type A ports right there, and then we're going to have 4 Type A ports right there. So this is going to be 10 gigabit, 10 gigabit, 10 gigabit, 10 gigabit, 10 gigabit. So that's 5 10 gigabit ports, 40 gigabits Type C, and then 20 gigabits Type C. So this is going to be really kind of the big boon right here that you're going to get on the Dash E, is that it's going to come with 40 gigabits, which is not on any other B850 based motherboard. And normally you would have the USB 4 add-in card to be able to have 40 gigabits. So you get 40 gigabits, plus you also get the 20 gigabits. This 20 gigabit ports also actually supports higher wattage. It actually supports up to 30 watts of PD output power for quick charging, which is pretty sweet if you want to be able to quick charge devices. So 30 watts of power delivery on this USB C port as well. 4 more Type A ports that you're going to have here, including the USB BIOS flashback port, which of course you can use with this button to be able to low-level update the UEFI BIOS without any CPU, DRAM, or graphics card installed. You then have 1 Type A 10 gigabit port right there. So again, that's going to be 2, 4, so that's 6, that's 10, 12 total ports on the rear, plus your 5 gigabit Ethernet, which still has that land guard design, right, to protect from surges, spikes, sags. And then you've got your Q antenna with your Wi-Fi 7 that's going to be on there, and then actually gold-plated audio jacks for the line level out, and then an optical out. And of course, for the Wi-Fi 7, that is also going to be featuring the Q antenna design. So that means it's just a push fit design, really simple to be able to go ahead and connect your Wi-Fi antenna and your Bluetooth, and also even offers better signal attenuation performance. So that is going to wrap up the I/O that we have on the B850-E gaming Wi-Fi. So moving on from our ATX-based motherboards, we're going to go to our last motherboard in the ROG Strix lineup, which is actually going to be our mini ITX-based motherboard, and this is going to be the B850-I gaming Wi-Fi. And I think for a lot of you that are going to be building a small form factor system, this might even be a more popular choice than our flagship X870-I gaming motherboard, as it has a more simplified design, but still really great in terms of the functions, features, and specifications. Some really nice upgrades compared to the prior generation B650-I, which many of you guys really liked. And of course, it's going to be coming at a lower price point compared to the X870 base model. So we've gone ahead and taken our ROG Strix B850-I gaming Wi-Fi, put it under our secondary camera here, and let's now go ahead and take a closer look at this board. So of course, it's super compact because it's a mini ITX based form factor. You can of course see this large VRM heatsink that we have here, which makes contact of course with the primary power component. So all the primary power components are covered, so you're actually your inductors and your power stages. It's an extended actually heatsink design, which is all aluminum, and you're also going to have that VRM assist fan, which actually, if I turn it just a little bit, you'll actually see right there, there is the fan, and there is some slits there to be able to offer some additional airflow. You might not necessarily notice it, but in this design there's actually filtering that takes place right here, so you can remove this if you needed to be able to access the fan and clean it out, so it is serviceable and easy to be able to get to. Here you've got your 8-pin power connector. Of course, for the CPU, this actually does support thicker pins, so it actually provides a higher level of current handling, a lower level of actually resistance as well. When we then take a look at the corresponding headers on there, there's actually 1 additional header compared to the prior generation. So prior gen actually only had 3, so here you actually get 4. So there's an extra flow header. You've got your CPU and CPU OPT, and then you've got your 4th header right there. So all the way around, quite a bit of header flexibility, and I like that they're all at the top of the motherboard. You're then going to have 2 ARGB headers right there as well. Compared, this is also an improvement to the prior generation where we had a legacy 4-pin and an ARGB. Now you have dual ARGB. This is more in line, of course, with the current generation of all of the hardware that's really out on the market, so it makes more sense. Now, when we take a look, we've got 2 DIMM slots on this board, which makes sense because it's a mini ITX based board. Does have outstanding topology performance in regards to that, so you can actually even run more aggressive clock speeds on a 2-DIMM enabled motherboard because you have less signal reflection. As we actually move down right there, we've got our primary 24-pin power. Then from there, you're going to see you've got your two SATA ports, you're going to have your USB-C, and then you're going to have your legacy USB 3, and then you've got your front panel connectors that are going to be on there as well. When you move over down here, you're going to have, of course, quick access to your M.2 SSD heatsink design. There are screws there, they are captive. Once you remove that right there, you then have the quick Q-latch design so that you can easily install your M.2 SSD without actually any standoffs or any screws. You just pretty much pop that off, lock it into place, and you're good to go. The secondary actually M.2 SSD slot is going to be on the back of the motherboard, and we'll take a look at that in a second. But lastly, when we take a look down here at the bottom, you're also going to see you've got your front HD audio connector right there, and here you can see your slot for your graphics card. Now the cool thing is that for this generation, we've also gone ahead and phased in the Q-Release Slim design, so that means you do have the ability to easily remove the graphics card there, which I love for these small form factor builds. So again, if we take this and we put a really big graphics card in here, and pretty much most graphics cards are going to be larger than a mini ITX-based motherboard, you can see how challenging it could be to attempt to kind of remove this. But now, again, just lift from the front and you can pull it out and you're good to go. So love this design, especially on this mini ITX-based motherboard. And when we flip the board over here to the rear, you're going to see your secondary M.2 slot on here. So again, this is Gen 5. And this one also is going to be a Gen 5, so you're good to go when it comes to the totality of the layout, and that pretty much covers everything. So next up, let's go ahead and take a look here at the rear. So at the top, you'll see the nice introduction of a clear CMOS button. So this just makes it, again, overall easier to be able to debug things, be able to reset the board back if you have any need for overclocking pursuits. You've got two Type A ports, including USB BIOS flashback, of course, in conjunction with this button right there. That means you can update the UEFI BIOS, no CPU, no DRAM, no graphics card. And from there, you've got a 10 gigabits Type-C port. This also supports DP. A lot of people miss this. This is actually the support. This port actually supports DP out, so that means it can actually work as a secondary display. So DP and HDMI. Type A, Type A, Type A, those are all 10 gigabits, and then you have 20 gigabits USB-C, another Type A, which is going to be 10 gigabits, and then you're going to have 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, which also supports the LAN guard design. You've got your Q antenna with, of course, Wi-Fi 7, and of course that Q antenna just means that you've got that easy push-fit based design for your Bluetooth and for your Wi-Fi. Simple, you don't have to worry about tangling, really easy to be able to go ahead and remove, and you get also better signal attenuation performance. You have Flex Key, which actually can be mapped to different functions in the UEFI BIOS, such as booting directly into the BIOS, or also setting things like RGB lighting to be able to be turned off. You have an optical audio output, and then your line level outs, as well as your other actually analog audio connections. So that's going to be covering you in terms of a total of 4, so that's going to be 6, and then 8 rear ports along with those dual USB-C, including one which supports 20 gigabits and that DP. So quite a bit of I/O connectivity on this board. If you want even faster I/O, then of course you would want to consider the X870-I gaming Wi-Fi. So that wraps up the overviews on covering pretty much all of the boards that we have within our B850 series lineup. Now we'll give you guys a little bit of a teaser that there's more information to come, that we're going to have another B850 based motherboard and actually under our BTF. So that's going to actually be our Back to the Future based designs, which are going to feature actually rear connections on the motherboards. So for those of you who want to be able to have really clean and stylized builds with essentially very minimal cables, then you're going to want to check out future content that will cover actually our BTF based models. That being noted, we've covered now the Dash A, the Dash F, the Dash E, and the Dash I, and I want to lastly talk about some performance tuning aspects on these motherboards and some of the specific features that you're also going to find within the UEFI BIOS that I think many of you are going to appreciate and really have interest in, and also are going to be applicable to these newest generation of boards. Some of these features are not going to be even found on our recent B650 based motherboards, even with new UEFI BIOS updates. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at some of the cool features you're going to have in regards to the UEFI firmware as well as to the software environment. So moving into the UEFI BIOS, we can actually see right here, I brought up the easy mode interface. One of the first things that I'll really love to highlight here is that we have actually moved into a full HD UEFI BIOS. So it's very sharp and clear. It allows us to actually even fit more information actually within the UEFI firmware. Again, many of you will maybe notice this coming in from the older generation series of motherboards going into the HD. It just really is so much more of a pleasant, sharper experience within the UEFI environment. In the easy mode, of course, you can see all the key information like your CPU, your memory, your BIOS, UEFI firmware revisions, core temperatures. You can make adjustments to fan controls. You can see whether your fans are connected. You can quickly enable AMP or Expo. You can adjust boot order, and you can even quickly toggle performance tuning options. So all of the key things you're going to need there. But with ROG motherboards, of course, many of you are sometimes interested in the more advanced functions and features as well. So let's dive a little bit deeper in. One of the cool updates that we have here is going to be the My Hotkey function, which now will actually take the F3 and the the F3 and the F4 keys to be mapped to two different functions, such as default is to immediately launch into Easy Flash 3. So instead of having to hit delete, go to tools and go into Easy Flash, you can now just immediately go in there. It allows for the flashing process to be that much quicker, that much simpler. You can also boot directly from a UEFI based USB device by accessing F4, but you can actually adjust these to different options as well. So I love these quick access options can now be implemented. Moving into fan controls, we've also implemented new firmware and hardware level controls, which offer us actually now twice the number of fan points. So in prior generations, we had a 4-point fan control, and now we have an 8-point fan control. So a lot more granularity and control to be really dialing things just the way you want them. I also really love this 8-point fan control, especially with now newer generational fans that are, going from 1600 to 2000 to 25 to 3000 RPM. This just gives you more control and more flexibility. And the great thing is, of course, this can all be done without any software directly within the UEFI BIOS, as long as the fans are connected to the motherboard. But you have the same classic controls also within Fan Expert, which is inside, of course, of Armory Crate within the Windows-based environment. Moving from there, you're going to see Q Dashboard. This is an awesome new utility that we have that allows you to visually see the motherboard, and you can see all the respective slots and ports, whether they're actually connected or detected. And then from there, the actual even corresponding menus within the UEFI for those devices. When you click on that corresponding port or header, will take you directly to that. So take, for instance, if I wanted to be able to have access to the fan controls, I could click on, let's say, the CPU fan, and it would take me actually directly to my fan controls. So this is a great addition. And we also have filtering right here, which allows you to quickly break down just maybe specific ports or slots if you want to be able to see that information. Moving beyond that, there's some great performance tuning options such as Precision Boost Overdrive, which many are probably familiar with PBO, but some people aren't familiar that just when you enable it, there can actually be sometimes parameters that you have to really define to be able to get the best experience from it. Asus has done a lot of work to be able to tune PBO specific to the power design of our motherboards, and then also offer specific temperature targets. That way, you don't have to really be concerned about hitting higher than standard temperatures, but still also unlocking enhanced performance. So you can actually pick from 1 to 3 different presets at 90 degrees, 80 degrees, or 70 degrees. Generally, in 80 degrees, you'll generally find that you'll get a performance uplift, and with 90 degrees, even a clear performance uplift. It's going to be most beneficial in probably multi-threaded applications, but you can still definitely see benefits within lightly threaded applications or gaming workloads. We also have some supplemental options like medium load boosted, which can be actually used in conjunction with PBO to be able to get additional performance. We're also going to offer a new option that's going to be called Core Tuning Configuration for Gaming, which actually helps to handle some certain optimizations and boosting behavior specific for certain types of gaming workloads. And you can see there's some different options you have available that you can go ahead and tailor. What I would also recommend is you take advantage of our multiple UEFI BIOS profile options to be able to quickly be able to kind of toggle between one and the other if you want to be able to use this. So you could take, for instance, have core tunings enabled on one profile, and then you could have another profile with save with something else. So that way you don't have to kind of keep switching back and forth. You could just load between one of those different profiles. And we have multiple profiles available to you. So you can really actually set many of them up, and then you can just be switching from them accordingly. Turbo game mode has also been implemented, and this is going to predominantly be most beneficial for those CPUs that are going to be running essentially multiple CCDs, so dual CCDs, so something like the 9950X, although it can also potentially be beneficial for X3D series CPUs. But to keep in mind, you'll see in the notice information that it can also negatively impact performance, so it does somewhat depend on game scenarios, game engines, and what you're going to be running. But it is a great feature that you can test out and see if it benefits you specific to your game and to your overall workload. So wrapping up our video, one of the last items I want to talk about is actually a really great addition that we have that actually moves beyond the UEFI BIOS, but it's actually a combination of hardware and software, and this is actually going to be with Asus AI Advisor. So this is actually a new application that you can install. Once you install it and you log in, it's connected to the web and actually uses an advanced backend engine which leverages ChatGPT, along with actually some specialized LLM models and some specialized systems that we have in place designed by Asus, and combines them together to be able to give you actually a really intuitive way to be able to ask information about your hardware and your system, but can also actually even provide you direct actionable prompts based on your actually questions in the form of a response. So let's go ahead and actually show you an example of this. So we can actually see right here a recording from the AI Advisor prompt, and from there you can see, hey, I'm asking it, my PC is too loud, tune my fans down, and actually can give you much more information about understanding how you can actually go about utilizing the fan controls that the system offers, but you can actually see how it's actually also tied in directly to the fan controls. And so right from that prompt, you could actually set it to, let's say, silent mode, and that would actually quiet your fans down. So this really can help to evolve the usability of the functions and features that you have on your system, and we have a lot of advancements that we're going to be working with and over time to be able to offer more functionality, more usability, along with providing you more information about how you can best understand your hardware, the functions and features that you have on your Asus series of motherboards. So make sure to check out Asus AI Advisor. So that wraps up our overview on the latest generation of Asus AM5 based motherboards, specifically the ROG STRIX B850 series of boards. Again, we're going to have the Dash A, the Dash F, and the Dash E on the ATX side, and then we've got the Dash I on the Micro ATX side. These are going to be really a great series of motherboards for you to consider when you go about either building or upgrading your AM5 based system. If you guys have more questions, comments, or feedback, feel free to go ahead and drop them down in the comment section below, and we'll do our best to go ahead and get back to you. We also strongly recommend make sure to check out the link description and join us in our Asus PCDIY Heartbeat community. It's an amazing community of like-minded PCDIY builders that share everything from their build logs to upgrades, where you can also find out information on the latest and greatest products, important updates, and a lot more information. There's giveaways. There's also our PCDIY Hall of Fame contest and competition that we have that goes on, allowing you to have your systems featured, and so much more. So make sure to check out the PCDIY Heartbeat community. With that, guys, best of luck with your builds, and I look forward to seeing you in the comment section.